Please. We're losing money everywhere. Everything we touch turns to shit. What is happening? Hello, fellow netizens, and welcome to Scandalous Games, the show where we take a closer look at video game-related controversies. I'm Kevin Impellizeri, and I do the research and share a story of a video game controversy to my friends.
Elford Stephens.
John Dukes.
Bill Thomas.
I'm really excited for this topic because today we are going to look at the Turok naming contest. These are a pair of contests hosted by publisher Acclaim for the game Turok Evolution, where they encourage people to either change their own name or change a family member's name to Turok. Has anybody heard of this?
I have not, and it sounds amazing, by the way.
I had never heard of it before you mentioned it.
Yeah, me neither.
I thought we'd open with a discussion question, which is, what would it take for you to change your name to a brand?
A permanent name change, a whole lot of money. I'm thinking $10 million. $10 million, and I might change my name depending on what the name is. There's certain names that's not going to happen even for $10 million.
I don't know, Alfred. Have you seen how hard Facebook makes it to change your name?
I don't think I can change my name for anything. If you give me like $10 million, I wouldn't do it. I always say I will do it and just take it anyway, by the way. I just can't change my name, man. It can't be me.
You know how money $10 million is?
I know how much money $10 million is, yeah. You're going to have to give me more than just money.
So, I mean, that could buy like a lot of houses in a private island for you to be called Head and Shoulders.
I mean, John has a pretty memorable last name, so I don't blame him. But, I mean, private island. Are you sure you've considered all the angles on this, John?
Yeah, I don't want to do that. I don't want private islands. I like simple things.
What about this then? So again, you've got an amazing name, John. So I think this is going to be different for you. So what I would suggest maybe for you, what if it's like Dasani presents John Dukes?
Nope. No budge. Keep going though. I might buy into it, but maybe. I like what you're getting at with this. Go ahead. Proceed if you have anything else.
What about you, Phil? What would it take for you to change your name?
Probably a can of cat food. I would do it pretty easily. I mean, I'm of the mindset that people's names dictate their futures. Like, the only reason I think the musical artist John Legend is famous is because of his last name. Can you imagine what my life would be like if my name were Phil Legend? Oh my God, that is Phil Legend right over there. Yeah, he's eating a salad. So with that in mind, I would change my last name to Turok so that if I had a son, he would grow up to become the hardest hitting defensive back in NFL history. Here's the play, and he's tackled for a loss by Turok. That play was blown up thanks to another vicious hit by Philip Turok Jr. And then he makes like chomping motions as the crowd yells, Turok, 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 Turok. So yeah, I would want to hand on the Turok name like any treasured family belonging. That's why I would change my name to Turok. But no, I don't think I would change it to like Johnson and Johnson or Head and Shoulders or anything.
I do like where you're going with legacies when it comes to Turok, because Turok itself in the lore is a title. It's something that is passed down from generation to generation as a hero of the Lost Lands. So why don't we talk about it? Let's get into it. We'll talk a bit about Turok and this contest where Acclaim tried to get people to change their name to Turok and take kind of a deep look at this. Let's step back for a second. Can anybody tell me what they know about the Turok video games?
First-person shooter. It kind of feels like Doom, but with dinosaurs.
Turok had a focus on actually trying to capture you in a world, making you feel like you were in this environment. Some parts you were in nature, and then there was some science fiction in it. And for the time, it actually captured the idea of being a hunter, using your bow or using your knife to fight.
Yeah, for the uninitiated, they were a series of games that came out in the late 90s and 2000s. As John said, they were first-person shooters, and they focused on a person named Turok, who was one of several Native American warriors who fought dinosaurs, they fought hunters, they fought sci-fi enemies like aliens and insect people and giant monsters and dinosaurs. And it was this hybrid of primitive lands, but also like sci-fi environments. They were really characterized by over-the-top sci-fi weapons. I played a shit ton of Turok 2. I love that game. It's flawed. It has some technical issues, but the fact that you could be this warrior who can attack monsters with everything from a bow and arrow to rocket launchers to what I think is the greatest weapon of all time called the cerebral bore.
Oh, yeah.
Which is literally a weapon that hones in on an enemy's brainwaves and drains their brains out till their heads explode.
Yeah, I remember that weapon so much. And I was like, as a kid, I was so delighted that that was actually a weapon that you can do to your enemies. You know?
What's it called again?
The cerebral bore.
Okay,
Yeah.
It's interesting you say that because I thought the cerebral bore was one of the computer science courses I took in college, Intro to Optimization Theory. Because being in the course sounds a lot like what this weapon did to you, and I'm wondering if I'm the victim of a war crime or something without even knowing it.
Your teacher was sneaking up on you behind you with this weapon.
Yeah, I guess that class was more interesting than I thought it was.
After your class, you left with several chunks of missing cerebellum. It's funny to think about this weapon and recognize that even though on paper this would sound extremely gruesome, the capabilities of the 64 couldn't have shown you anything that would have been.
And that was so surprising to me this time. I remember when I first saw it in action, I was like, Jesus Christ, you can do that now with games? That's awesome. You know?
All right. Here's a brief video of the cerebral bore in action from Turok 2.
Yeah, it's brutal. Dang, look at that. Yep. Just like that.
That looks like that kind of recording. It looks like something that moral crusaders who are trying to say how video games are turning us all into psychopaths and serial killers, if they were to describe a game, that's probably what they would describe.
Having seen that for the first time, it's really kind of sad because the attack opens up with the brain coming out of the monster's body. And there's a second where you're like, maybe if we stop using this, it'll go back in. But then there's an explosion taking all of that off the table. That's kind of horrifying.
I mean, for games like that, like especially with Doom, like it's for some reason I don't want to say I'm against violence, by the way, completely. But there's something satisfying about watching some monster getting torn up like that. You know, there's something maybe kind of rewarding. I mean, I played a bunch of violent video games. I could say Mortal Kombat, Turok, Doom, Resident Evil. There's something about it that keeps me wanting to play more and just find it interesting in some degree.
With that, we're going to go a little further back now because I feel like to talk about Turok and the Turok naming contest, we have to get more acclimated with this character and with this particular brand. This has a really deep, fascinating story that goes back a lot further in history that even predates video games. So I'm going to take you all the way back to October of 1954 with the release of something called 4-Color Comics. 4-Color Comics number 596 specifically. I'm going to put up an image here in the chat. 4-Color Comics was a series of one-shot stories published by Dell Comics, and the title for issue 596 was Turok, Son of Stone. Does anyone describe what they see here on the screen?
I see a Native American man with long hair and braids and a single bird feather in his hair, clutching what looks like a spear with a knife at his waist. He's in maybe a cave looking out as two dinosaurs, they look like T-Rexes, are battling each other.
So the way 4-Color Comics, they're one-shot comics, and this one focused on Turok, who was a Native American man, and he and his friend Andar come across a series of caves that lead them into like a Land of the Lost style world where there are dinosaurs, and they try to find a way out. After this one shot, there was one more one-shot story in Full Color Comics number 656. This was in 1956. And eventually, Turok spun off into its own solo series that ran between 1956 and 1982. These stories were published by Dell Comics and the later Gold Key Comics. But we're going to skip ahead a little further than that, to 1989, to a guy named Jim Shooter. And Jim Shooter had been the former editor-in-chief at Marvel. He had been ousted from the company in the mid-1980s. And initially, he tried to get revenge on Marvel by trying to buy Marvel and say, you know what, you're going to fire me, I'm going to buy your ass. And when that didn't work, he decided to do the next best thing is, you know, you're going to kick me out, I'm going to start my own damn comic company. And he formed a company known as Valiant Comics. Has anyone heard of Valiant?
I have, yes.
Read any of their comics?
Jeez. Yeah. Aliens in that series, in that comic publication, right?
I don't recall. I know Dark Horse eventually had the rights to the alien stuff, but I don't know.
Oh, okay. I don't remember, honestly. It's been a while.
So Jim Shooter founds Valiant Comics, and in the early 1990s, Valiant enters a licensing agreement with Western Publishing. They had time with the people who owned the rights to Turok and to the whole Dell and Gold Key comics library. So Shooter's looking for properties. He buys up the rights to a bunch of ones from these companies. And in 1992, Valiant decides to launch its own Turok series, now under the name Turok Dinosaur Hunter. And I'm going to put a picture of that first issue here. Anybody want to describe what they see here on the screen?
I'll go ahead. So despite the fact that the previous comic was from the 50s and this is from the 80s, Turok still presents as essentially a white person, even though he's Native American, but he has rippling muscles and is pointing a very tense, short bow and arrow at what appears to be several large snakes or one giant monster off screen that has many giant snake heads. He is shirtless, but he has stretch pants on.
It's a very 90s comic cover. I will also point out, I have a copy of this particular issue. It's also holographic, which is so 90s.
Is that an upside down car he's on?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I couldn't even tell.
He looks like he's been hitting the gym for the last 30 years.
Yeah.
He's shredding it up. Maybe injecting a little bit every once in a while.
Got swole for the 90s. So Turok Dinosaur Hunter ran for 48 issues before it got rebooted in 1996. On April the 8th, 1994, Voyager Communications Inc., they're the bigger company that owns Valiant. They get bought out by another company, Acclaim Entertainment Inc. Acclaim bought the company for $65 million in cash and stock, which now gave the licensing to Turok to Acclaim. Does anybody remember Acclaim?
Yeah, they had really good games. I can't remember what the games are. Maybe I think Double Dragon was one. Don't quote me on that. Yeah, I don't remember. I'm sorry. I know they make good games back in the day.
So here's a little bit about Acclaim. Acclaim was founded in 1987 by a bunch of former Activision employees. They kind of get a foothold in the American games industry as not a game development company, but as a game publisher. So they're the ones handling like the distribution, the advertising, this big picture logistics of video gaming. And they were noteworthy because they were the first American video game publisher. And they get a foothold initially because they court Japanese game companies who didn't really have a foothold in the States, and they act as their publisher. And eventually, as the company grew, they got into licensing recognizable properties. And they did licensing games, or they published licensing games for a ton of different properties. Some of their early licensed games include, they did WWF games, so World Wrestling Federation themed games.
Oh, yeah.
They did a bunch of the Simpsons games.
Uh-huh.
They did Marvel Comics games, actually under a subsidiary called LJN, which did a bunch of notoriously terrible Marvel Comics themed games like X-Men and like Silver Surfer.
Oh, yeah.
They also, as you mentioned, John, they got the licensing rights to a bunch of popular arcade titles. One of them was Double Dragon 2.
Oh, that's right. Yep.
And they published Bust a Move on the home console and Smash TV.
Oh, yeah. That's good.
And Smash TV is noteworthy in particular because they had partnered with Williams. Williams Entertainment was a pinball manufacturer that was also a coin-operated arcade maker. And it was with Williams that Acclaim got its high watermark, its biggest properties it ever had. In 1993 and 1994, because of this deal with Williams, they secured the exclusive home rights to what were then the biggest arcade games of all time. Well, up there. They were super big. The first, Mortal Kombat.
Oh, yep.
Mortal Kombat comes out in the arcades in 92. Acclaim gets the exclusive console rights to publish Mortal Kombat for the Super Nintendo, the Genesis, the Game Boy, the Game Gear, every major system that mattered. In 1993, they released them. And then in 1994, they have the other big Williams Entertainment, and shout out if you know this one, NBA Jam.
Uh-huh. That's right. Yeah.
So in very short order, Acclaim is a big financial company. However, the gravy train soon came off the rails because Williams Entertainment realizes, these games are making a lot in the home market. You know what we could do? We could publish them ourselves and cut out the middleman. So their deal ends in 1994 with Acclaim, and they decide to make their own home company. So Acclaim all of a sudden in 1994 is looking for new revenue streams. Their cash cow is gone. And so we need to figure out something to do instead. So they decide that with the lucrative deal ending, they're going to start getting into the actual original IP game development publishing business. But they need IP. And so they reach out to Valiant. That's why the Valiant sale happens when it does. Is because now all of a sudden they have the rights to all those Valiant comics, one of whom is Turok. They also decide they need development development companies to do these games. And so they acquire 3 game publishers that had worked with a lot in the past in their licensing games. Those are Sculptured Software, Probe, and Iguana. They acquired Iguana Entertainment in December of 1994, and Iguana is going to be important in a second. They also, I've got to imagine that some of this was a knockback at Williams. Acclaim decides they're going to get into the coin-operated business and try to beat them at their own game there. And in July of 1994, they formed their coin-operated division called Acclaim Coin-Operated Entertainment, Inc. Now Acclaim has the rights to Turok. They got game developers, and so they're going to make their own games. And so they give the job of making a Turok adaptation to Iguana Entertainment, which was an Austin, Texas-based game company. And in 1997, Iguana releases, well, Acclaim releases specifically, Turok Dinosaur Hunter for the N64. Acclaim CEO Greg Fishbach once described Turok Dinosaur Hunter prior to its release as, quote, the Star Wars, Jurassic Park, and Twister of the video games business.
Was there a Sharknado in the game? Because I'm having a hard time understanding how all of those could happen together.
It's so big. It's such a big game. It's going to be the greatest game of all time. So what they came up with, the game is a first-person shooter with some light platforming and a whole bunch of annoying collecting that starred Talset, aka Turok, who uses his creative and deadly weapons to battle this overlord in a land called the Lost Lands, which is kind of a fusion of jungle settings and space settings and science fiction. It's kind of a mixture of a bunch of different genres. And the big enemy he's fighting is a guy called the Campaigner. And the Campaigner is looking to get pieces of this MacGuffin called the Chronos Scepter. And it's up to Turok to stop him. That's the game. And the game was a big hit for Acclaim. It had positive reviews. It had great sales. It sold around 1.5 million copies. And in fact, according to GamePro, Turok earned $60 million by the end of June 1997 and accounted for about 45% of Acclaim's revenue that quarter. So it's a big hit for them. A year later, they keep riding the Turok train with Turok 2, Seeds of Evil. In this new game, the story focuses around a guy named Joshua Fireseed. He's a descendant of Talset. He's now the new Turok, and he battles the Dinozoids, an army of humanoid dinosaurs, and tries to stop them from releasing this evil entity known as the Primogen. I'm going through these games pretty quickly. Has anybody played Turok 1 or 2?
Yeah, I played them both.
Yeah, what do you think of them?
Very memorable. I like the weapons I used. I thought they were really cool ideas and very unique. The cerebral bore, I think, was the most interesting one. But I thought the weapons that they have us use were a lot of fun to use in the game.
Dude, I'm just gonna say I fucking love Turok 2. This is one of my favorite games on the N64. This ultra violent dinosaur themed game, which I played a crap ton of. But yeah,
Turok 1 and 2 as well. And actually, I went back to my mom before COVID, but I brought back my 64 and some of the games I still had, and I still have my copy of Turok 2. Brought back a lot of memories because I just remember the feeling of freedom in Turok because you were able to do things like jump in the water and swim that you weren't really able to do in a lot of the games. And even though today's standard, it seems small, like back then, it was huge. It was free. They were just, as I remember, pretty well-made games. They played well. They were unlike anything that were being offered at the time.
certainly not for the N64. Because there were first-person shooters. 1997 GoldenEye comes out, but both the level of complexity and violence is pretty unheard of for that particular system. If you do like the first two games, this company Night Dive made HD remakes of the first two Turok games, which are a lot of fun, and I think fix some of the technical issues. Like there's a whole thing in the second Turok game where it takes a long time to get the save points. The stages are huge. You could be navigating and going through twists and turns, and it could be like an hour before you find a save point, which is frustrating. So like they have you can save anywhere. And there are a couple other things. The hit detections kind of sucks in Turok 2, especially if you have explosive weapons. 9 times out of 10, if you're using the explosive weapon on an enemy, nothing will happen, which is frustrating. Fortunately, the remake fixed that, so it makes it a lot more fun. That's also a success. It's well regarded, sells really well. So we move on to 1999. This time, Acclaim releases Turok Rage Wars. This is a multiplayer heavy spinoff of Turok 2. And then in 2000, they followed that up with a proper spinoff, Turok 3 Shadow of Oblivion. And what's neat about Turok 3 is that it's got a conceit like Dishonored 2, where at the beginning of the game, you're able to pick between two characters. They are Joshua Fireseed's siblings, Danielle and Joseph Fireseed. And you pick that one character at the beginning and you play play as him throughout the course of the game. I don't know if it changes the game experience, mostly because I've never played Turok 3, but that's kind of a neat thing. You don't see that very often in games. And that one does fine. Rage Wars and Turok 3, they don't sell quite as well as the other two. They're not as highly regarded as Turok 2 and Turok 1 are, but they're still fairly solid games, and they're good money makers for Acclaim. So they're making the most out of this license. So now it's moved to 2001. We have ended the era of the N64, and we're looking to the next generation. So your PS2s, your Xboxes, your GameCubes. Sorry, Dreamcast, we're not going to be talking about you today, unfortunately. On May the 18th, 2001, Acclaim formally announces the next installment in the Turok series called Turok Evolution, being developed by what's now called Acclaim Studios Austin. That's what Iguana has now been renamed. According to creative director Dan Deanspear at E3 2001, he said, Turok Evolution is an exciting blend of sophisticated technological advancement and raw primal ferocity, promising lush environments teeming with prehistoric life, all while taking part in an epic story in the war-torn Lost Lands. The name is officially announced on January 15th, 2002, and the story is revealed to be a prequel because, it's 2002. Everybody loves prequels. The well-regarded Star Wars prequels are in their full swing. We had seen episode 1, The Phantom Menace, in 1999. So we were just prequel crazy in the late 1990s, early 2000s. It put players back in the role of the first protagonist from Turok Dinosaur Hunter, Mr. Tal Set, in his first adventure to the Lost Lands. Another thing that made this game different from the other ones, it was now going to be a cross-platform game. It was no longer a Nintendo exclusive. It's coming out for all the major ones: GameCube, PlayStation 2, original Xbox. Again, sorry, Dreamcast. And the game was scheduled for a US release on September the 1st, 2002, which the marketing named Turok Bloody Sunday. And in the UK, it was coming out on September the 6th. And this game was promised to have living environments where you could actually interact with the terrain. You could use, for example, grass or trees for cover. You could knock over trees and use them to hit enemies. It also promised a really robust AI, which they called having squad dynamics, where the AI would actually plan and react and try to flank you and things like that. And by all early accounts, things look pretty promising.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So this is a Scandalous Games podcast. Was there any controversy over the title Bloody Sunday for a video game?
For this one, surprisingly, no. It's interesting. That's not really where the scandal is for this one. Not so much in this naming, but in a different kind of naming we're going to talk about. Feel free to talk amongst yourselves. I'm going to bring up a trailer for Turok Evolution.
Nice.
All right, here we go.
Mowing them down.
Phil, you look stunned.
That was pretty gory and visceral. My first reaction is it's so hyper-saturated with violence. It feels like Doom, but with dinosaurs. And I'll give them credit. The character Talset does actually look more Native American in this version, but it's kind of weird that he's using the traditional weapon of his ancestors, which is apparently some sort of chain machine gun or Gatling gun. Just mowing these dinosaurs down.
Yeah, it's not even like hunting. It's just like brutality. I mean,
Not very sporting, huh?
that poor Stegosaurus just got blown away by a chain gun. Jesus Christ.
We all know you'd be smiling as you were blowing those dinosaurs away.
there's a Simpsons episode where it's Lisa and Bart are looking at a preview, and she's like, "This looks like a pointless endeavor," and Bart's like, "Oh, yeah."
You know, the preview didn't show us any story. It was just straight up just gunplay the whole time. It wasn't even like a fight between them. It was just the murder sections of the game.
It's funny you mentioned that. We'll talk about that in a bit, about whether or not this game was any good, and two, stuff like that. Like what kind of features are there and what features aren't there. By E3 of 2002, so in the summer of 2002, the reports are sounding pretty good. This game seems pretty promising. So this is GameSpot reported from E3 this. This is from an article from May 23rd, 2002. It said, quote, "Perhaps the Star Wars series has brought the concept of prequels back into fashion. The newest Turok game, which is appearing on all 3 current-gen consoles, is set before the original game. Of course, the regression in setting doesn't necessarily imply a regression in gameplay. Quite the contrary, Turok Evolution is looking to be the most advanced in the series." So people are getting kind of excited about this game. It's May, game's coming out in September. But something happens in the intervening months. Now we get into the crux of what this episode is particularly about, because in August of 2002, Acclaim announced a pair of contests. They're going to tie into the release of Turok Evolution. One of them ran in the United States and one of them ran in the UK. And each of them involved people naming themselves or other people Turok. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start out, we're going to talk about the UK contest first, because it was the one that was announced first, and mostly because I think the US one is a little crazier. But here we go. On August the 12th, 2002, Acclaim announces what they call the My Name is Turok contest in the UK. It promised to award £500, an Xbox, and every game in the Turok franchise to 5 lucky people who were willing to change their name to Turok and keep it Turok for at least 1 year. Now, if you're curious, 500 quid in 2002 is the equivalent to 831 pounds, 82 pence today, which for those of us on the other side of the pond is about $1,153.29. So for all of you who said it had to take like $10 million for you to change your name, what about $1,000 and an Xbox?
So that may not seem like a lot to us right now, but if somebody was promising a PS5 with the restocking issues that are happening with that console right now, I'd have to think about that.
I don't know. I think that small sum of money kind of discriminates towards $1,000 to change my name. Nah. Maybe if I was young, maybe if I was like 15.
It's a good joke. Let's just say it like that.
What am I going to tell people when I change my name to Turok? I'm going to go to work. I'm going to be like, so your name is Turok now? Why is your name Turok? I do like Turok. I like the name. If I'm going to tell them, oh, because I got paid $1,000, that's not going to fly.
You could say Turok's signature catchphrase, which appears in all the games. I am Turok. When they ask you what's happening, just say, I am Turok. All right, here's some of the details of this contest, because you might be curious how this all is supposed to go down. So the way that the contest is written out, this was on mynameisturok.com, a since defunct website, which I was able to access through the magic of the Internet Archive. The Wayback Machine is a great source of information for us game historians. Contestants had to first fill out an application with some personal information, the standard stuff, name, address. For some reason, they asked income level, which I thought was kind of odd for a contest of any kind. They also had to write in a brief statement of why they should win the prize. And I feel like most of those essays can be something along the lines of, well, I'm willing to change my name to Turok for money. But the idea was that they committed to change their name by deed poll to Turok. Now, a deed poll is basically a document that informs the government that you're changing part or all of your name. There are 2 kinds of deed polls in the UK. There's unenrolled and enrolled. I'm not going to go into the specifics, because I think this was probably an unenrolled deed poll, which is basically just a letter of intent. It's a letter you fill out and sign in the presence of 2 witnesses, and then you file it with the British government. And the idea is anyone over the age of 16 can fill one out, but it's pretty standard. This is how the British government says it now. It's like, I have given up my old name and now I want to be called this, and it's signed off by 2 witnesses. So it's a pretty standard form. Contestants for this had to sign up before the game's release in early September 2002. So that's how this contest goes out. Any other thoughts about this one?
I'm very interested to know more about this contest and who was the Turok,
So who were the lucky winners then?
Yeah.
We'll talk about that in a second, but why don't we talk about the American one? Now things get interesting. the way they did things here in the States. So this is called the Turok Labor Day Contest. And it was announced on August the 27th, 2002. This contest, rather than change your own name, promised a $10,000 savings bond to expectant parents or people who were pregnant at the time.
Wow.
Who promised to name their new baby Turok.
Wow. I love that.
That's a lot better. A $10,000 savings bond for your baby. For a name, honestly, I think Turok is an awesome name. So that's not bad.
Here's the hook with this one. It wasn't just that you were willing to change your kid's name to Turok. They also had to be the child that was born closest to midnight on September the 1st, 2002.
Wow. Interesting.
So this involves a lot of pre-planning.
So this is competition. Like,
yeah.
You have to want it and then hope that your child gets born. So I'm kind of a little bit against that.
So it's like, okay, I have planned to have a child. I'm going to induce as close to September the 1st at midnight as I can.
I was thinking that what's interesting about it is that it plays on, well, one, it's really hard to change your name in the United States. So somebody at the Turok marketing board, and I assume we're going to talk about these people at some point, was like, well, I guess we'd have to get them when they name their child. And two, what's a good incentive? Cash might not be enough for people in the United States, but how about we play on people's biggest fear and concern, the well-being of their children? Giving you $10,000 might not be a big incentive, but what about $10,000 for your children's future? Think of the children. Won't someone please think of the children?
They specify in the contest this is specifically a Series EE savings bond. Now, I know we have one finance expert. I don't know if this falls into your wheelhouse, John. Do you know anything about these kinds of savings bonds?
I haven't studied those now.
Okay, so the way a EE savings bond works is when it's issued, the person pays half of its face value. So in this case, it would cost Acclaim $5,000 to buy this savings bond. And the idea is that it accumulates interest at regular intervals. It will mature after 17 years. And a person can continue to get interest on it before collecting the bond up to 30 years. So if they got this bond, it would reach maturity in 2019, 2020. And they could theoretically hold on to it till about 2032 if they wanted it to continue to accumulate interest. And the interest changes based on the year.
Question for you. So they are purchasing a $10,000 savings bond, meaning they're investing $5,000, right?
Correct.
Now, if I remember correctly, I didn't know all of that, but the EE savings bond is one of the ones that you can use for college, right?
Yeah, that's one of them.
I would imagine that a person in entering this may not know what a EE savings bond is and may not recognize that it's $10,000 that they're going to get 17 years later.
Yeah, that's a good point, Alfred. I mean, when you say, oh, I'm going to give you a bond, and someone who's not quite aware what a bond is, be like, what the fuck's a bond? Is that cash?
That's a long maturity period for a bond.
Yeah, it's usually long term, and they get they get interest back probably twice per year.
And I would imagine if you tried to sell that bond early, its price is going to be low because it's
hasn't matured. Maturity. Yep, and there's the consequence of that. It'll do more financial damage to the bond that you're intending to save on.
The interesting thing of what you guys were saying earlier is that maybe the board executives had this intention of stimulating this feeling of goodwill that most people have towards their children as they're getting born. But if they're going to make a time window at which an average family can get $10,000 if their child is born within a specific period, it does tend to want people to push a situation that could be risky for the child. And then you had to make a decision to rush this child out of the womb.
I mean, you gotta wait 17 years.
Seriously, it really sounds like
that's insane.
It sounds, what's the word?
There's
so many families that $10,000 will make a huge difference for their family.
And how long can you wait too? You want to wait 17 years plus for that to mature?
There's so many families who just having another child means such an economic burden, and an offer for $10,000 is very interesting. This whole thing is very interesting. Amazed it wasn't covered on the news.
I'm glad you mentioned that because we're going to get to news coverage in a second.
I know that you noted, or you were careful to note, Kevin, that income was one of the survey questions for people entering the contest.
It was in the UK one. I'm not sure if it was in the American one.
Okay. So I'm already starting to sense that there might be a predatory angle here, but I can't wait to hear where this goes.
Okay, so first, let's go into the announcement of this. So buckle your seatbelts. This is how they announced it on their website. It was called the Turok Labor Day Contest. This was at turok.com/baby. Win $10,000 to name your 9102 baby Turok. That's right. Grab hold of your expectant lady and get ready to push. Because if your kid is the first baby out of the hatch on Sunday, 9102, you can win 10 grand in U.S. savings bonds just by naming him Turok. What could be better than being the father of the dinosaur hunter? Keep the neighbors at bay as he battles raptors with his bare hands. Watch as he spits back his formula in favor of regurgitated Quetzalcoatl as his food. Listen in amazement as the first words from his mouth are, "I am Turok." Well, maybe not, but $10,000 sure sounds good. Here's the deal. If your wife, or if you're the wife, you are expecting with a due date on or around September the 1st, 2002, and are willing to legally name your baby Turok for 1 year, just pre-register right here at Turok.com. Out of the list of applicants, if your infant is the first one born on Sunday, September the 1st, 2002, then baby Turok gets $10,000 in U.S. savings bonds. Here are the stipulations. Winner must provide official proof with time and date from the United States hospital. Winner must also sign a legally binding intent form to name their child's first name Turok. $10,000. The United States Series EE savings bonds will be awarded to the winner on furnishing a valid birth certificate that clearly identifies the baby's first name as Turok to Acclaim Entertainment. Click here for official rules and regulations. So what do we think about that copy?
They keep on saying 10 grand, 10 grand, 10 grands, but not like saying 10 grand bonds. Damn, I would hate to break it to them. Say, where's my 10 grand? But you get 10 grand bonds. You get interest. You know what I'm saying? You get twice per year. You get interest. It's like, I don't want interest. I want 10 grand.
Give me the money now.
Yeah,
I've debased
exactly.
myself enough for this.
I mean, the way that marketing ploy just sounds like they're going to give you 10 grand, but not really. You're getting 10 grand in bonds. That's so misleading right there.
So here are the rules for this contest. This is how they were listed out on their website. Again, as I said before, the winner was the family whose child was born closest to midnight of September 1st, 2002, and parents agreed to name their child Turok and keep that name for at least a year. So they eventually set up press things that clarified that don't name your kid Turok and then fill out for the contest. Say you're going to name their kid Turok, and then if you win it, you do that. You had to provide proof that your child was born as close to September 1st at midnight as you could. And if you did that, if they were to identify you were the winner of this, then you promised that by no later than the end of the year, so December 31st, 2002, that you would provide proof that the child's name had been legally changed to Turok and that you kept it for a year. So that's where the contest ended up. So the idea of this contest was, according to the website, according to press stuff that Acclaim supplied, was the brainchild of a guy named Simeon Cantrell. The idea of this was an innovative new advertising strategy he had developed that he called, quote unquote, identity marketing, which the strategy involved encouraging people to change their names to recognizable brands to transform people into what was described in news reports as human billboards. And so this Simeon Cantrell, Dr. Simeon Cantrell, was of the Institute of Science and Marketing, or ISIM, or the ISIM. I'm not sure how they called it. And apparently Cantrell first introduced his identity marketing concept in 1999 at the Symposium on Extreme Marketing, which was held in Brisbane, Australia. And at this symposium, he argued, quote, the more personalized the message source, the greater the endorsement and the less effort is needed to obtain the required mass. So this idea that like it's a minimal effort thing for a lot of return for brand recognition. Or as Cantrell told the BBC, quote, there could be thousands of people called Pepsi, Brill Cream, Toyota, and Yahoo happily going about their everyday lives while subtly communicating the virtues of their brand namesakes. And he apparently also elaborated on his idea in a book he called Market Their Pants Off.
Now, if the contest was to name myself Broom Cream, I may have signed up. $50 and a bottle of malt liquor to to change your name to Broom Cream.
I have a legit question with this kind of marketing strategy. What if you agreed to change your name to a brand and then that brand goes out of business? And I mean, this is in 2002. He's pitching this in 1999. This is during the .com bubble. Could you imagine a bunch of people walking around today in 2021 who are named Ask Jeeves or like Pets.com?
I don't know. I should probably ask my friend GeoCities McQueen about it. Call it Geo for short.
Geo. I feel like if you changed your name to Yahoo, you got to do it like the old marketing in 1999. Yahoo!
Oh, yeah.
You must agree to say it that way.
I mean, there's like an unintended consequence that if somebody changed their name to a brand and then something like Twitter comes along and they claim that Twitter handle because it's their name legally, they have the right to it above the company. Like Turok Jones can get the Turok Twitter handle and then Turok, the brand, can't get it. But I guess they weren't thinking of the logistical ramifications of this at the extreme marketing convention.
I'm curious as to if you know of how this guy came up with this theory, because that's what I'm going to leave it as, a theory, because it seems to clash with the way people actually name things. Because naming is something that has been happening for as long as you believe humans have existed. And this whole idea that, we're going to get people to change their names to fit a brand actually goes against what people do. When people name, they're actually... most names are kind of, this is occurring, but they're going with things that people already know are stable. You know, there's a reason why so many Americans have the same names of European kings and queens. I mean, there's a reason for it, you know. And so the idea in marketing, I imagine, is most of the time is you're going to be pushing a product that is new. And I can see somebody naming their child for $10,000, but I don't know how many $10,000 fees Ask Jeeves is going to be willing to pay people to name, 10,000, enough people so that we would actually meet one of these people named Ask Jeeves and have the opportunity to make fun of them.
Are you questioning the methods of Dr. Simeon Cantrell? I'd like to see your doctorate in marketingology. We'll talk about Dr. Simeon Cantrell in a second, but so this unconventional contest in both the UK and the US attracts a lot of media attention. It attracted outlets, obviously, in the gaming and the tech world, but it also got a lot of mainstream press. Everyone from CNET, USA Today, the BBC, the Associated Press, they're all putting out articles on this stuff. I found articles, everything from gaming sites like GameSpot and IGN, Nintendo World Report, Christian Science Monitor. All these places are talking about this contest. So it gets a lot of press. Let's talk a bit, though, about the winners of this contest. So according to reports, about 10,000 people signed up for the UK contest. And on September the 2nd, 2002, Acclaim announces its 5 winners. Their names are Turok, 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 and Turok. No, that was a dumb joke, but their names are in reality Ross Davidson, Paul Codling, Matthew Grist, Andrew Bowflower, and Layla Oberman. And according to Sean White, Acclaim's UK communications manager, said, quote, "The 5 Turoks will no doubt speak to and meet tens of thousands of people between them over the next year. They'll be talking adverts for the Turok video game. They'll tell 2 friends, and then they'll tell 2 friends, and they'll tell 2 friends. And then everybody's going, it's like, why in God's name did you change your name for a video game? I have no evidence of a winner for the US contest, alas." So what do we think of all this as a marketing strategy?
Oof.
Well, I imagine it didn't work because we don't see any more Turok games.
Much like Turok, the game themselves, it's just overly aggressive, and just putting a brand on someone's life just sounds, or forcing your values onto you,
So not a great marketing.
A terrible idea, and it should not be the case.
I want to say a disclaimer that Turok 1 and 2 were very much unlike this competition, this naming thing. That was Turok 3 and Rage Wars and the rest.
So I would say I agree with you, John, in that this is a terrible idea, but I disagree that this is bad marketing. I think the fact that, how they say no publicity is bad publicity? The fact that it's sensational and headline grabby, that's what you want out of a marketing ploy. Additionally, I don't think this was the last time something like that was ever tried. Because if I remember vaguely, I thought ESPN was doing something like this for the first child named Espen. I could be making that up. But so I think it's a horrible idea, but I think it's a decent marketing tactic.
You're feeding my curiosity there. Now I want to know about, has this been tried in other companies?
I'm glad you asked those questions, because what if I told you that there is more to this Turok naming contest story?
Oh,
Definitely interesting.
So I give credit to this part to a person named Connor McCarb, who did an investigative journalistic piece in 2020 for the site VG247 for a article that came out on June the 24th, 2020, where he did some digging and tried to track down the winners of the UK Turok naming contest. Those 5 people I mentioned a minute ago. And he tracked down deed poll records. He went through other government records. He even went through Facebook to try to track down people who their first name was Turok. And there was also apparently some of the reports describe what profession these people had. One was apparently a midwife and another was a dental technician. So he tried to go through records of registered dental technicians to see if any of them were named Turok. No Turoks. And eventually, he was able to track down several of the 5 winners. He doesn't list their names in the article. They decided to be anonymous. But here's the thing that they told him. These were not some random Turok super fans who were just, champing at the bit to change their name legally for 500 quid in an Xbox. They were all actors that were paid by Acclaim.
Wow.
Really?
Interesting.
So you're telling us nobody signed up for this?
I don't know if they saw. There were claims. Now, whether or not these claims are true, Acclaim said up, down, and sideways. When people did the questions, okay, is this a joke? No, really, is this a joke? They claimed it wasn't a joke. They said people really signed up. They claimed, legitimately 10,000 people signed up. I have no idea if that's true or not. But I told you we'd go back to old Dr. Simeon Cantrell and his identity marketing. I will point out also that, just as an aside, there was at least one blog post from the time that pointed out that they noted at least 2 of the so-called winners were actors and called it a hoax. They thought this thing was all fake. But that was the minority opinion. Most news sites just took the story and ran with it and never really critically examined whether or not this was real or not, and never followed up to see if whether or not the people that Acclaim had listed had really done this. So the bigger story was, this man bites dog is news kind of thing. This game company wants people to change their names to this fake video game character. But let's go back to Simeon Cantrell. The only hits on searching online for Simeon Cantrell are related to the Turok naming contest. That's the same for the 1999 Symposium on Extreme Marketing in Brisbane, Australia. And the same also goes when you search the Institute of Science and Marketing. So we're getting a couple of question marks. And so Acclaim, when they posted the contest, they have a whole section on their website about Simeon Cantrell identity marketing. And they mentioned that book, Market Their Pants Off. When they did, they listed the ISBN number for the book. If you search the ISBN number for the book, this is what comes up. A book by Scholar Anderson called My First Knock Knock Joke Book.
Sounds like a good book.
So it's possible if people did a little digging and had better access to, the internet was not quite as robust in 2002 as it is in 2021, that they might have realized that this whole thing was a fake. It was just a publicity stunt. We'll go into why. But all of this raises the question of why a company would do this. Why would they do this sort of stunt campaign to get some attention? You might want to know what's going on at Acclaim during all this. And so a little while ago, when we last left Acclaim, Williams had backed out of their deal and Acclaim had bought Valiant Comics, and Acclaim had formed its own coin-operated division and had acquired Probe and Sculpture Software and Iguana, who made Turok. So the intervening years were, to put it mildly, awful for Acclaim. Acclaim was, to quote the Big Lebowski, the goddamn plane had crashed into the mountain. So here's the things that were happening at Acclaim between 1994 and 2002. First off, Acclaim was really reluctant to get into the CD gaming business. So when the PS1 comes out, they stick with Nintendo. They stay with cartridges. They go with what's safe. One of their executives apparently said something along the lines of, there's no punishment in being second getting into it. So they back off of CDs, and that was an awful mistake in hindsight. They stick with cartridges. The companies that stuck with cartridges specifically fared financially very badly in the 1990s with the N64. As wonderful as some groundbreaking games that were on the N64, overall, it was not a good financial bet to stay there. And the bigger stuff is happening with the CD stuff. And so Acclaim is really left in the dust and put at a really big disadvantage in the late 1990s, to the point that retailers are starting to send back unsold cartridges back to Acclaim.
Dang.
And when that happens, they assume the financial burden. So they're losing a lot of money that way. They also get into a bad habit of changing their earnings estimates kind of on the fly. They get into a habit of, in a particular quarter, saying this particular number. I'm going to make up a number. Say, we're going to make $10 million of profits. And then as they get closer through the quarter and they're nowhere close to that figure, it's like, well, did we say 10 million? We meant 2. And as a result, this puts their stock in a really bad position. So their stock keeps tanking. And this is not encouraged as a financial maneuver. And so the Securities and Exchanges Commission starts investigating them too.
Yeah, like that. It sounds like they're cooking the books.
And you know who also doesn't like it when you're basically fucking around with your estimates? The game developers you're working with. And so as a result of this, they start suing them.
Yeah.
For example, Digital Pictures, who we'll talk about in a later episode, believe you me, and SoundSource Interactive, both in December of 1996, each sued Acclaim, accusing them of, quote, listen to this, shipping thousands of units of games on the last days of its third and fourth quarters of fiscal 1995 to a warehousing and distribution firm and fraudulently recording the shipments as revenue.
Wow.
Then 2 to 6 weeks later, Acclaim accepted the return of each unit shipped and charged a restocking fee.
To the developer?
They are basically they're manufacturing the materials for these developers, and they're not selling. And so they're taking the unsold stuff and they're moving them to like warehousing companies.
Mm-hmm.
And they're counting that as selling them. And then after they mark that as revenue, they're buying them back, or they're just taking them back because they're just renting them out. And I'm not an expert in that, but I'm pretty sure you're not supposed to do that.
No, yeah, you don't. That is a gaping hole in your financial records. I mean, that if someone to look at that and saying, why are you like, okay, so basically they're making numbers up out of the blue with this. They're basically adjusting it based off their belief that they're selling something. So their shareholders say, oh, okay, we're making money. Nope. We're not. We're fucking you over, basically. Yeah, they're just making things up. And when you make things up, you get SEC involved. And that puts a big possible prison situation in the Fairview. It's pretty just really over the top and really stupid. It's just really fucking stupid. That's called a career killer right there, you know?
So they're doing that. They're losing money hand over fist because of the cartridge issues. They're getting the government involved by cooking their books effectively.
No, they are cooking the book. Yeah, I mean, and the government saying this doesn't make any sense. How are you estimating this amount of money, but you're putting yourself in debt at the same time? And
they're getting sued by a bunch of their other companies. But don't worry, it gets worse. So you remember I said with the coin-operated division they found that they're going to try to get into coin-op business. There was no worse time to get into coin-op gaming than in the 1990s, especially the mid to late 1990s. It's like this is starting the slow death of arcades. And Acclaim's coin-operated division is an abject failure. And they shut it down in March of 1998. It was only in operation for about 4 years. In fact, a Wall Street Journal report from 1998 said the coin-op division had no revenue in 1997, made zero money. In 1999, they lose one of their biggest licenses. They lose the World Wrestling Federation to THQ. I will say that one of the spinoffs of this is that THQ then goes off to create what are arguably some of the greatest wrestling games of all time, those being WrestleMania 2000 and WWF No Mercy, which are some of my favorite games for the N64.
Oh, that was good. Those were good times.
Those good times.
Yes, WWF No Mercy.
So
Yeah,
Acclaim,
it got more ridiculous with that game, but I like that. It was a fun game. It was good times for sure.
on the licensing front, they start losing some of their licenses. And one of the big ones is WWF, now known as WWE. And so they try to fill the void left by this lack of a wrestling brand. So they reach out to ECW. Any ECW fans here? Extreme Championship Wrestling?
Heard of them?
Yeah.
They enter a deal in November 1999 to develop games for WWF rival Extreme Championship Wrestling. And Acclaim also acquired a minority equity interest in the company. And then ECW folded in 2001. Another one I haven't mentioned in a while. What's happening at Valiant Comics? Valiant, now known as Acclaim Comics, was also a disastrous failure for Acclaim. Bob Layton, who at one point was editor-in-chief of Valiant when Acclaim was owning, explained in an interview in 2020 that Acclaim paid basically double what Valiant was worth. They vastly overpaid for this company. They basically asserting that these guys did not know what they were getting into. And going off that point, people who worked in executive positions at Valiant when Acclaim was owning them pointed out that Acclaim had no experience in comics. They didn't know the business at all. And for the most part, they basically just turned to the people who were running Valiant and said, you guys figure it out. And so editor Jim Parham told a reporter, this is the editor of Acclaim Comics. He told a reporter in 2000, quote, Acclaim has always had this attitude. And this goes from day one when they bought comics. Look, we don't know the comics industry. You know the comics industry. That's why we bought you and pay you the big bucks we pay you. Go do comics.
I mean, yeah, again, I'll go back to what I said before about Acclaim. They have some sort of business model, but they don't have the heart to distribute what they do,
Their business,
Yeah, they're a business, but they don't have the drive or creativity. They just want the money, period.
And this may come as a shock that Go Do Comics didn't work. And a comic book website called CBR described Acclaim Comics in 2000 as, quote, a comic book cancer victim holding on by a thread, but never quite dying.
Oh my God.
So they're hemorrhaging money. They're losing subscribers. Like, it's a disaster. And it is a disaster on top of all of the other disasters happening at Acclaim. So they've got this, they're losing their licenses, they're not selling games, they're getting sued left, right, and center. Their earnings estimates are all across the map. Their coin-operated division completely fails.
The earning estimates are not real.
So to put it mildly, the 90s kind of sucked for Acclaim. And so we now have a company that while they're making Turok in 2001 and 2002, 2000 to 2002 is when they're making this game, that where the situation at Acclaim is increasingly dire. And so we have a company that is pretty desperate for a hit. On top of that, they're maybe willing to try some things because nothing is working for them. And this is where we enter another player into our story here. They reach out to Frank. Frank isn't a person, it's an advertising agency that was founded by a guy named Andrew Block in 2000. And Andrew Block forms this company called Frank. It's based in Manchester, UK. They enter a deal with Acclaim on August the 1st, 2001. And Frank and Andrew Block have a kind of unconventional approach to advertising. Now, I don't know if this was inspired by what they were doing at Acclaim or if this was always the founding principle at Andrew Block's company, Frank. Basically, it focuses on marketing based on shock headlines through proposing insane public relations ideas. It's something that they've later called, and this is kind of their brand now because they're still around, called talkability marketing. So unlike identity marketing, this is real. And basically talkability marketing is this idea of what they said on their LinkedIn page, quote, we create insight-led campaigns that generate buzz, kickstart a reaction, and make a real difference. So kind of shock is their business. Put something out that just sounds so over the top that it can't be real. But what it does is it generates a lot of press attention and a lot of buzz and gets whatever company it is in the conversation and sort of the public zeitgeist for a little while and can trigger things like people making hot takes and reactions to the stuff. And what are they thinking kind of stuff. Here are examples, some recent ones that they did. Most of these are British companies that they've worked with. So there's one, they entered a deal with a company called Bath Store. They're kind of like a plumbing fixture company. In 2015, they pitched an idea for something they called the Q-Loo. It's a porta-john on wheels. that they rolled out to select places in London during the 2015 Wimbledon tournament. It's a porta-john where the interior is all tennis themed. So it's all AstroTurf and like tennis rackets hanging on the walls. And the flusher was a tennis ball. And they parked this thing outside of public spaces during Wimbledon. And then in 2017, they followed that up with something they called Luber, which was apparently an app where you could request a mobile porta potty in case you have your phone and nature calls while you're out somewhere. Or my favorite of them, this is with a company called List, which I believe is a fashion design company. From 2007, Frank developed a campaign called the Over My Dead Body campaign, which was marketing a line of fashion options that were marketed toward dead people.
Wow, interesting.
You know, the funny thing about what you've been telling us is when I first saw the picture of Andrew Block, I said, this looks like the type of a guy who's used to people bringing bags of crap to him and asking him to do something with it.
Yeah, put lipstick on this pig. I will say that Andrew works at a company called Frank, but he very much looks like a Chad.
I've got to imagine some Acclaim executive sitting with Andrew Block and just grabbing him by the collar. He's like, please. We're losing money everywhere. Everything we touch turns to shit. What is happening? Save us.
Please market us out of these management problems.
Stop me before I manage badly again.
And Andrew Block just kept smiling and kept selling.
So here's some of the other things they thought of. So the Turok naming contest was not the first thing that Frank develops for Acclaim. The first one was on March the 14th, 2002 for a game called Shadow Man Second Coming. Has anyone heard of Shadow Man?
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, it does sound familiar.
I'm thinking of Shadowrun.
Was he a guy that had like his face wrapped up?
No, that's
Dark Man.
So here's what Frank thought of for Shadow Man 2. On March the 14th, 2002, Acclaim announced it would pay bereavement costs for the relatives of deceased people if they were willing to have small billboards for Shadow Man Second Coming carved into their relatives' headstones. A strategy they creatively called Deadvertising.
How many of you guys randomly visit graveyards during the week?
Oh, yeah, all the time just for inspiration.
I mean,
No.
Where else am I supposed to write my poetry?
So you take the one place that few people go to and you put your advertisement there.
Here's a report from The Guardian about it. A spokesperson told The Guardian that the payments would benefit low-income people and would be, quote, a subsidy to burial costs to give their loved ones a good send-off.
God.
And apparently payments will be doled out with regard to the exposure potential of the particular headstone. So if it's in a pretty prime burial location, you might get more cash for that. This triggered a denunciation from the Church of England, which said it would not allow tombstones advertising in Anglican cemeteries.
I guess it might work on the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier brought to you by Navy Federal Credit Union.
Your grandma may be dead, but you know what's not dead? These low prices.
I do think maybe if you are at a funeral and you're standing around listening to the preacher talk and you turn and saw a gravestone and it had a cheeseburger and fries on it, right? You might actually get hungry.
Eulogy provided by the Noid.
You put the McDonald's right across the street and you'd have the fans blowing that fried juice over the grave. Man, people would be lining up. Sorry
about your grandma, but you deserve a break today.
Oh, you beat me to it. Ba-da-dum-bum-bum.
What's fun about when you say a crazy thing like this is that you could always say later on it was a joke, which is exactly what Acclaim did. According to a CNET report a couple months later, Acclaim later said it was nothing more than an early April Fool's joke. And then this was actually not even the only Turok-related weird advertising campaign they did. Frank orchestrated another PR stunt in May of 2002, where they flooded out reports to the press of a 25-year-old Londoner by the name of Jason Reed, who apparently announced that beginning on July the 18th, 2002, he was going to set the world queuing record for waiting for a video game, promising he would camp outside of the electronics boutique at 100 Oxford Street in London and wait there until September the 6th when Turok Evolution came out in the UK. So a full 50 days of waiting outside, which I guess is some kind of world record. And he probably didn't do this. I think I found like one account that said maybe he was out there for a day with a tent and then he just packed it up and left, if it ever happened. And it also was not the last time that Acclaim tapped onto the creative mind of Andrew Block to try to save them from all of the financial ruin that was happening to them. On October the 2nd, 2002, so only a couple of months after the Turok naming contest, Acclaim offered to pay the fines of anyone caught on a speeding camera on October the 11th, 2002, which coincided with the UK release date of the PS2 version of the racing game Burnout 2 Point of Impact. The announcement prompted a denunciation from the UK Department of Transportation, which, according to a spokesperson from them, said, quote, "They want to foot what is likely to be a hefty bill. That's their choice. Basically, they're encouraging people to speed and to break the law. I just hope for their sakes that none of these people ends up knocking down a child." And then in 2003, in June of 2003, Frank seemed to really like Wimbledon because this is a Wimbledon one. Acclaim told the press in June 2003 they were going to send out trained pigeons that were spray painted with the logo for Virtua Tennis 2 at the 2003 Wimbledon tournament. And I love this quote from a spokesperson that said, quote, "The Virtua Tennis 2 pigeon marketing campaign is highly targeted, and it brings awareness of the game directly to tennis enthusiasts. The Wimbledon tournament is famous for the occasional descent by pigeons onto center court, but our advertising pigeons are trained to go straight for the fans and flap their logos in front of them." Because everyone loves to be assaulted by pigeons.
America's favorite bird.
Or seagulls.
Oh, can you imagine seagulls with advertising? It's like, buy the Baconator!
Yeah, I had some really bad seagull experiences where one, I had just an ice cream cone. I was walking on the boardwalk and a seagull just came by, knocked between me and my girlfriend at the time, and I dropped my ice cream and they all swarmed on the ice cream. It was like a ball of seagulls just devouring it, and they all dispersed and it was gone. Like the whole, in seconds, the ice cream cone with the ice cream was gone. It was insane.
For nothing. I had a friend of mine who was on the boardwalk and a seagull snatched a French fry right out of his hand, like flew down, grabbed it, and flew off.
John,
it's horrifying. That's funny.
In that situation, what did the seagull tell you to buy afterwards?
Buy more ice cream.
It asked me to invest in ice cream.
What's in your wallet?
Kev, I thought of an interesting tie-in with the speeding ticket one. What if somebody on that day was speeding to buy their copy of Turok and they hit a small child and the child was also named Turok?
Oh my God.
It's like, what are the odds? This game is everywhere.
What's synergistic branding on that vehicular homicide?
Yeah. Also very sorry for your loss.
And now that they're dead, they could put an advertisement on their tombstone. It all connects.
Brought to you by McDonald's.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba, indeed. All right, I got one more Andrew Block advertising idea. This one was for the PS2 Xbox game Gladiator Sword of Vengeance. In November 2003, Acclaim announced that they would be commissioning a set of bus shelter ads in the UK that were supposed to bleed. They had some kind of mechanism where some kind of heavy red dye, this red liquid coming out, and that would drip out of the plexiglass holding the ads onto the stream and would bleed this red dye for about 6 days, in which they creatively called bloodvertising.
I got two theories. One, Andrew Block was very similar to the management of Acclaim, and they functioned together because they were so much alike. They had very similar perspectives on creativity. The other theory is that these guys were having a lot of fun with the money that they were paid. They were just going to do whatever. Blood poster's going to sell a product, I'm sure.
I don't think you're resorting to considering blood-based advertising for companies going well. And this is a testament to how desperate they are, that they're even considering these kinds of I mean, they're all hoaxes. Clearly there was no intention to do any of these things. And who knows if they even ever made the throughput and said, we're going to get a savings bond and give it to somebody. I don't know if they ever did any of that. And it's like the fact that they're willing to do this for attention speaks a lot to the fact that they're not doing terribly well. And it doesn't help that in 2002, they're really hinging a lot of hopes onto Turok. And what do we think about this game? Do you think it saved Acclaim?
I think it probably embarrassed them more, honestly.
This goes back to the question I was asking in the beginning of do we think this game was any good?
Oh, probably not.
This came out on Xbox, right?
It was for PS2, Xbox, and GameCube.
Had Halo come out by this point?
I got to double check. I think Halo came out before it.
Because this game would be competing with Halo at this point.
Halo came out in November of 2001. So Halo was a thing when Turok was out.
So my answer would be no, I doubt that this game was successful, that the marketing of it helped. If it had to compete with Halo.
Bless their hearts at Iguana/Acclaim Studios Austin. This game was not very good. I played a bunch of it in researching for this show, and it is so much a step backward from the other Turok games. Whereas the other ones are like big, expansive worlds with lots of multiple objectives to do. It is straight up linear. There's no storytelling. The N64 had cutscenes, and this has like one or two. It's so bare bones storytelling, and is literally just, okay, Talset's in the Lost Lands, go to this next area. And their highly touted AI is not very good. The environments, I mean, they were probably good for 2002 standards, but they're not great. The weapons are not remarkable. I got so frustrated playing it at one point, I put the invincibility code on just to get further in the game, and eventually just realized, what am I doing with my life? And stopped playing. So it's not particularly good. And part of this was not entirely Acclaim Studios Austin's fault. They had a really tight development window. Apparently it was only 2 years they had for it. 1 year spent roughly developing the engine and 1 year developing the game. On top of that, they had to develop it for 3 different systems, whereas in the past, they only had to worry about one. And apparently there was, I'll give credit to a guy named Matt McMuscles who did a whole YouTube video on the troubled development of Turok Evolution for a series he calls What Happened. And he talked about how there was lots of turnover in Acclaim Studios Austin, would Acclaim bringing in people and laying them off and then bringing in new people. So there's not a lot of continuity. So tons of firings and rehirings. And on top of that, they had to develop another game on top of that, this game called Vex. So they're in really tight restrictions. The people who are at the top are just giving them such poor guidance and are creating such turmoil that it's really hampered in a lot of ways. And it also doesn't help that the people at the top are desperate. They want this game to save their company. And it's like, okay, so we're not going to give you a lot of resources, and you're going to develop these other games. And if it doesn't succeed and sell all the copies, then we're going to go under, you're going to lose a job, and it's all your fault. So not great odds for this game. On top of that, this is something I just find especially annoying about this game. You don't have any big, huge baddie this time. There's no campaigner. There's no Primogen. Instead, it's just some white dude. It takes place in like the 1880s. And it's this American cavalry dude named Tobias Bruckner who gets sucked through a portal with Talset, and eventually he's got like a robot arm or something. But it's literally just this racist white dude who you fight, who apparently, spoiler alert, gets eaten to death at the end. And in fact, there was one magazine which apparently for a while did something called the Tobias Bruckner Award, which was an award for the worst villain of that year. And critical reception was super mixed on this game. Some critics praised its graphics, its sound design, its combat. They thought the AI wasn't great. It wasn't considered really a big advancement in the medium. The most scathing was this person, Casey Reese, who was at Nintendojo, who pulled no punches and said, quote, Turok Evolution screams 2 words. Rush job. Given another 3 months of work, this game could have been enjoyable. Perhaps Acclaim thought it was better to spring this one on the public unawares, market the game by throwing a bunch of gruesome commercials on television, and hope enough people bought it before the word got out. This could also explain why Acclaim didn't send reviewable copies to video game media publications for the game release, which is always a good sign. So is Turok Evolution the final nail in the series' coffin? I can't honestly say for sure, but after this game, I don't see why I'd want to play another Turok game in the near future, especially considering there are so many more and better titles to choose from. So that leaves me with only one thing to ask. Have you no shame, Acclaim? Have you none at all? So not great. It didn't help. In June of 2004, Classic Media LLC, which at this point owned the rights to Turok, they end their licensing agreement with Acclaim. They terminate their rights. It might have been the poor reception of Turok Evolution. It also might have been the fact that Acclaim wasn't paying all of their royalties to Classic Media.
Right.
So the royalties they're making on the game, apparently they're not sending them to the parent
I
company.
mean, they can't even pay royalties.
Yeah, well, they told them in their quarterly report that we're going to give you $1 billion. And then a week later said we're going to give you $10.
We're going to give you an estimation and call it money.
And we've talked about bad Acclaim business deals. This apparently was a habit of theirs. In April of 2004, Dual Star Entertainment, which had also sold their license to Acclaim, also sued for breach of contract. Is anybody familiar with Dual Star Entertainment?
No.
This is my favorite part of this story. Dual Star Entertainment is the brand name of Mary Kate and Ashley Olsen.
Oh,
Acclaim
nice.
got sued by the Olsen twins.
It sounds like some sort of adult entertainment sort of stuff. Dual entertainment. Like, maybe I shouldn't be going to that website.
So they sued Acclaim for $660,000.
Wow.
And I love this line from the lawyer for Dual Star Studios. Said, quote, "The abandonment of the Mary Kate and Ashley brand video game franchise by Acclaim is the single dark spot on the otherwise unblemished success story of the Mary Kate and Ashley brand across myriad media and territories. This is the worst thing that's happened to the Olsen twins. Worse than Full House. Worse than When the West Was Fun. Worse than It Takes Two."
Yeah, and that's what provided the springboard for the third Olsen sister to rise to Marvel stardom.
It all worked out in the end, I guess.
Yeah.
All right. And so Acclaim files for Chapter 7 bankruptcy on September the 30th, 2004, and they're no longer around anymore. If you're curious what Turok has been up to, since Acclaim's demise, there have been 2 original Turok games and 2 remastered versions. Propaganda Games rebooted the series. So again, everybody loves prequels and reboots. They just called it Turok. It was published by Disney Interactive Studios. It's not terribly good, is my opinion of it. Night Dive Games, which I mentioned a little while ago, in 2015 released remastered versions of Turok Dinosaur Hunter and Turok 2 Seeds of Evil. They are a lot of fun. It's fun playing Turok 2 on the Switch. I had a good time with that one. And there was a chibi style, like Hello Kitty cutesy style design Turok game in 2019, developed and released by Pillow Pig Games called Turok Escape from Lost Valley. And that's the story of Turok and the Turok naming contest.
Wow.
And poor Turok.
I was Turok.
When you played Turok 2 on a Switch, can you pick the control design that you would like for the joysticks?
I believe so. It worked pretty well with twin sticks on the Switch.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a good time with it. Like I said, it fixes some of the issues. You can save anywhere, which is a huge improvement. It marks where objectives are, because those games were notoriously ponderously big, and it's really hard to navigate some of them. The third stage, the Lair of the Blind Ones, was so hard to navigate that when they added achievements to the game, they had an achievement for just finishing that stage with all of its objectives called "We Don't Need No Strategy Guide." So I thought I'd wrap things up on kind of a fun or a high note with a little mini game, kind of get us energized for the end of the show, which I call Lore or Lies. I'm going to present you all with a statement, and you need to decide if this is part of the Turok lore or if it's just something I made up. So the way this will work is I will tell you a statement, and you'll tell me if it's a lore or a lie. The way you're going to buzz in is by saying, "I am Turok." Are we ready for this one?
Mhm.
Okay, statement number 1. Turok draws his power from a magic satchel bag called the Light Burden.
I am Turok.
Elford,
I'm going to say lie.
this is real. Turok derives his power from a magic satchel bag, which, according to the website, turok.fandom.com, the Turok wiki, houses all of his weapons and all of his talismans that bear all of the powers he has. And apparently there's one story in the comics where he convinces the Primogen, one of the villain from Turok 2, to jump into the magic satchel. All right, so statement number 2, I got 4 of them, so I'll do pretty quick. A large story arc in the 90s Turok comics involved Turok allying with a subterranean race of beings called the Mutors to battle the forces of the evil Metlar, an enormous lava monster bent on conquering the Lost Lands.
I am Turok.
All right, John, what you got?
I think that's lore.
This one is fake.
Oh, fudge.
I just described to you the basic plot of the 1980s animated series Inhumanoids.
Damn.
So it is real, but it's not Turok.
Oh, that's devious.
That has a really catchy theme song in Humanoids. I recommend looking it up.
Sounds familiar.
All right, statement number 3. In 1995, there was a pilot for a Turok-themed cartoon, which paired Turok with a surfer-themed dinosaur sidekick named Stegs, whose catchphrase was, "Prehistor Radical."
I am Turok.
Bill.
Lore because I have to see this show.
I wish it was real. That one's fake.
Yes, radical.
I want to will that into existence.
High radical?
I said prehistoric radical.
Prehistoric radical.
All right, and our final one. An unusual addition to a game set in a primal fantasy world. One of the sub-bosses Talset battled in Turok Dinosaur Hunter was a Humvee.
I am Turok.
John, what you got?
I think it's a lie.
This one's real too.
Oh,
What?
my God.
One of the bosses is I'll bring it up. One of the bosses is literally you fight a Humvee.
How is that possible?
Man, I haven't played that game in a long ass time, by the way.
You know, the Humvee was the car in the 90s. Like, that was like the I'm rich car. I remember one kid in high school's parents had the Humvee, and they would drive up in the Humvee and everybody would be making a big deal out of it.
Yeah, but did you want to fight the Humvee?
If I was Turok, maybe.
Yeah. Really,
There were muscles on that vigilant Turok.
I don't know.
Serpentine, Turok, serpentine.
Like, for those of you listening, it's a dude with a machine gun, and the Humvee's just driving circles around him, and he's shooting at it.
I like the noise it makes.
Not the best battle, though. The camera's a little shaky. It make you feel sick.
This match is so creative. I mean, who would have thought to put a Humvee in this game and to fight it as a boss? That's hilarious.
If anyone wanted to see someone shoot a Jeep to death, there you go. There it is.
Oh,
There's a second one apparently. This Humvee was made of Humvees.
they had a baby Humvee.
So yeah, that is the boss fight for Turok Dinosaur Hunter, where he fights a Jeep.
I mean, it'll run out of gas in like a minute and a half. Couldn't you just wait it out?
Has anyone ever driven a Hummer or like a Humvee?
No, I haven't.
They are scary as all get out to drive. A guy who my mom babysat his kids picked them up at one time at a friend's Humvee. It was like a big yellow one. And he asked me to move it from the street into the driveway. And it was one of the most terrifying drives I've ever had because like you're so high up and it has so many blind spots. It's so disoriented where you are relative to other cars. Like I've grown up driving minivans, so I can drive big cars, but clearly it's a vehicle that was designed for combat that someone decided that we need to have these on civilian roads. But that was such a stressful, like 10-minute drive. I've never been that on edge in such a short time in a car.
So if you had to fight someone in a Humvee, what would your strategy be?
I would probably do what you suggested and wait for it to run out of gas. And then hit it with a cerebral bore. All right. So thank you for taking this journey with me as we went through whether or not we would change our names to brands and fighting Humvees and insane advertising campaigns. So thanks for everybody for being a part of this. And that'll do it for today's episode of Scandalous Games. Be sure to like and subscribe to the show wherever you're listening to us. Check out more information about the show on our website, scandalousgamespodcast.wordpress.com. Our theme song is Occam's Seek We by Seek Knowledge, used under a Creative Commons BY-NC SA 3.0 US license. Link to their music through Free Music Archive is in the description. And on behalf of Elford Stephens, Phil Thomas, and John Dukes, I'm Kevin Impellizeri saying thanks for listening and see you next Scandal.